They're not going to get traumatized in any way?
They're not going to get traumatized.
They're not going to get scared in any way?
No. No, and by teaching children simple things about what their private parts are, what is okay for public display, what is okay for private display, you start to teach a child about what is okay for them to show to the general world, and what is something that's private, which then they start to learn that, well, if it's private, then it's mine. I have ownership of it. Nobody can touch it in a way that I don't want. So that's the first thing. But without that comfort level, and without that confidence to talk about their body, a child is never going to be able to have the skills to be able to sort of prevent abuse as we want, and that's a start. And then beyond that, a parent needs to know that they have to believe their child. They have to tell their child that, it's okay, I trust you, I believe you. If a child actually comes forward, as we discussed before, and a parent responds by saying, I don't believe you, I mean, that's the end of the trust relationship.
What pointers, just quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like a checklist, what should these parents do to protect their children?
Well, I think, there are very few pointers, and they're very sort of easy and specific. And whenever we're working with parents, or we're working with teachers, or any kind of caregivers, what we are informing them about is that, you have to make your child comfortable with their body. So from a very young age, tell your children, these are your private parts. This is what's okay for public display, this is what is private. So immediately you give them a sense of ownership of their own body, and when something happens that they don't like, they know the difference between public and private, and what's okay and not okay.
Not just comfortable, you mean they should be more aware of their body.
And the start of that is telling them, well, these are your parts, discussing the body, not making them feel as though, the body is something that's shameful, or that's something that they should hide. Sometimes even in passing, parents, as a joke, a child, let's say, is running around undressed, when they're very small, and parents say something like, shame, shame, I mean, these little sort of things that we say to our children make them think that, their body is something to be shame, to feel shame about. And
when you said the kids running out and the parents say shame, shame, is that a good thing to say to the kid, or a bad thing?
Yeah, I have the same question here.
A bad thing to say, because what you're saying, why use the phrase shame, shame?
Okay.
What is it about nudity, which is shame, shame, for a 1.5-year-old who's running around?
Basically, what is
You're
it
actually
about
making
your
it
body?
cute.
You're making it cute, but it's, later on it stays as sort of a subconscious message.
I don't say shame, shame. Fine, I don't. But how do I get the message across?
Exactly what you just said, without using derogatory terms associated with it.
Okay, I see. That's more correct.
And exactly what you said. This is a part of your body that we cover with clothes. Because it's something that's private. It's your own. And then with that, then as a child starts to grow, we're talking about a very young age, as a child starts to hit 5, 6, 7, and they can understand a little bit better, you start to tell them things like, if someone touches you in a way that you don't like, talk to someone about it, tell me about it, I'll understand, I'll never blame you for it, I'll believe you, things like that. Teaching children how to say no, even. We don't teach our children that if you don't like what is happening to you, say no. Oftentimes that can be enough, because abusers do tend to prey on children who are a little bit more sort of naive, and a little bit more accepting of what's happening, as opposed to a child who's, outwardly says, stop that, I don't like it.
Before we get to the next point, I'd like to ask something here. Doing that to child, what age do you think is safe to start addressing or making the child start feel comfortable, aware of the body?
I would say that as soon as a child is old enough to start, pointing to various parts of their body.
Okay, like nose and eyes.
Exactly. When we're talking about awareness raising, right, and we're talking about how do you get this information out, well, part of what we're trying to do is get the information out, which is preventative information. But even with preventative information, there are going to be cases where, a child is abused. And at that point, what can a parent do? What information should a parent have? Or anybody else who's a caregiver to that child?
there's very obvious signs. As parents, you probably know that children have routines, so they like to do certain things a certain way. Any kind of disruption from routines, mood swings, regression such as bedwetting or thumb sucking when it's, fear of a particular adult, fear of going to a particular place. It could be school.
Okay.
So there's outward signs, like, a child who has too much knowledge of, sexual parts or processes. Why do they have that knowledge? And there's much more sort of obvious signs, that physical injuries and things like that, but these are also subtle signs because, children are creatures of habit. When we're talking about mass awareness, a lot of parents are not sensitized to this whole, concept that their children, particularly, I find here that there's sort of this attitude that children will grow up and just kind of learn, they'll amble through life and we figured it out, they'll figure it out, So there's very little emphasis on the fact that we as parents need particular skills to be able to parent.
Absolutely.
And without parents being sensitized to these things, you can't expect them to know that something is wrong.
Okay, earlier you said that 85% male sexual offenders.
Right.
Why are so many men pedophiliac, if that's a word, in this society? And I don't mean in this society as a country, only in this region. Now there are in the West as well.
Right.
Hundreds and thousands of Western men go to Pattaya Beach and to pick up young boys.
And clerics.
And clerics.
Not just here.
Not just here, but still there's a lot here. Why? Is it because our society, the masses are so suppressed? There's no exposure. There's no suppression. Deprived. What would you put your finger on as the single most reason for 85%, not 85% of the population, but the sexual offenders, out of the sexual offenders, 85% are men and 50% are women?
Is it because they're stronger physically?
No, I think that it's majority men globally, and so you can no longer look at it as a national or religious factor. You have to now look at it as as a part of male versus female.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. I can't give you a specific answer to that. I think there
Right.
are power dynamics.
Okay.
I think that is, men do have, usually have control of economic factors. I think in general, if you were to look at stats, I don't have stats on this, but in terms of even, adultery or men straying from marriages, I think those would be higher as well.
Right.
So I think that there's just patterns of behavior which lend to the fact that men, tend to be abusers more than women, but that would be my guess.
What Umar just said about children, young children on the streets of major cities of Pakistan working as sex workers, if I may call that, unfortunately. I also did some reading, and there's apparently a bus stop in Rawalpindi which specializes in this. It hires hundreds of young boys between the age of like 9 and 14. And there's a full report.
It's an agency.
We would probably have the link on our website of that report where it said, the boys are used as a sales gimmick for the area, for the hotels, and the gentlemen staying there. Often you can do whatever you want with the
There
boys.
was actually a story of a boy that I read, and this was on the BBC website. The story of a boy who goes out in the morning. He's the only breadwinner for his household. Okay, this kid is 11 years of age. Okay, this kid is 11 years of age. He is at this Rawalpindi bus stop. Okay, and is picked up by people who are in transit. Is picked up by local policemen. Okay, and he's picked up by local vendors. Okay, for sexual activity. At the end of which, he goes home with about 100 to 150 rupees in his pocket.